I want you to just take a second and picture it right now. The pale, noseless, snake-like face.
Oh, yeah. Everyone knows exactly what you're talking about.
Right. The flat reptilian slits for nostrils.
Yeah.
That stark, bone-white skin drawn super tight over a hairless skull. And, those gleaming, pupilless red eyes. We all know exactly who we are talking about here. Lord Voldemort.
It's honestly one of the most universally recognized iconic villain designs in all of modern pop culture history.
It really is. It's a face that is just burned into our collective imagination, right? A design that feels fundamentally anti-human. But here is the really jarring reality check we are kicking off with today. The movie. They completely lied to you.
Yeah, they really did.
The internet forums, mostly wrong. Even those quick AI summaries you get when you search this topic online, I mean, they are feeding you completely fabricated timelines about how, why, exactly when he actually got that.
It is genuinely fascinating how deeply the collective pop culture memory it's completely overwritten the actual documented biological and magical timeline.
Totally. We just accept the visual.
Exactly. We've allowed this cinematic visual shorthand to completely erase decades of extreme physical degradation. I mean, we've compressed a really tragic, gruesome biological evolution into a single, highly inaccurate snapshot.
And that is exactly why we are here today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking a brilliant fan question we found in our sources, a deeply philosophical question, actually, regarding the potential aesthetic redemption of Voldemort's soul.
It's such a good question.
It really is. And we are using it to anchor a comprehensive, exhaustively detailed timeline of Tom Riddle's physical evolution. We are going to map out, step by excruciating step, exactly how the most handsome, charismatic boy in the wizarding world turned into an actual walking, breathing biological nightmare.
And we really need to frame this discussion correctly from the outset, because this isn't just, a recitation of historical events or a timeline of battles.
Right, it's way deeper than that.
It is. We are approaching this as a forensic biological study of dark magic. We are going to explore the literal, physical, anatomical cost of chasing immortality.
The actual toll it takes on the body.
Precisely. Because magic, especially dark magic in this universe, isn't just a tool you wield. It is a corrosive force that fundamentally reshapes the vessel wielding it.
Right. So before we can even begin to understand how he lost his human form, we have to understand the extreme genetic spectrum he was born from. We have to look at the raw materials.
The baseline guy.
Because his initial physical perfection wasn't just a lucky break. It became the very first weapon in his arsenal. So let's wind the clock all the way back to 1925 and look at the Gaunt lineage.
Well, the Gaunts. The Gaunt family represents the absolute tragic extreme of pure blood supremacy. We're talking about a lineage that traces directly back to Salazar Slytherin himself.
The founders.
Yeah, they were perhaps the only family in the wizarding world at that time who could genuinely claim to be 100% pure blood, without a single Muggle ancestor hiding anywhere in the family.
Which is incredibly rare. But that level of ideological purity comes with a devastating biological tax.
Absolutely, because closed genetic loops are unforgiving.
Right. You can't just keep intermarrying forever.
You really can't. To maintain that unbroken magical lineage over centuries, the Gaunts had basically run out of eligible pureblood families to marry into. They resorted to extreme, multi-generational inbreeding.
Wow.
And by the time we arrive at Voldemort's mother, Merope Gaunt, the physical toll of that closed genetic loop is just undeniable. I mean, the magic might still be present, though repressed, but the physical vessel carrying it is fundamentally compromised.
The physical description we get of Merope from the historical records as well, it's pretty grim. It's not just that she was unattractive, she looked biologically burdened.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, her hair is described as lank and dull. She had this plain, pale, rather heavy face, and the most striking, unsettling detail, her eye, just like her brother Morph dared in opposite.
Right, a classic physical manifestation of severe genetic bottleneck.
Exactly. It's so sad, really.
It is. Merope's physical form is the literal visual manifestation of a decaying ideology. The family's obsession with purity literally deformed their own lineage. She's isolated, she is horribly abused by her father and brother, and she is trapped in this decaying, biologically compromised body, living in a squalid shack.
It's a horrible situation. And then right across the valley from this rotting magical family lives the complete opposite end of the genetic spectrum, the Riddle family.
The contrast is just staggering.
It's massive. Specifically, Tom Riddle Sr. He is everything the Gaunts despise, but he possessed everything Merope lacks.
Right. Tom Riddle Sr. is described as a stunningly handsome, dark-haired muggle. He is wealthy, arrogant, riding around on horseback, just entirely oblivious to the magical world existing on the edge of his property.
He represents the absolute epitome of Muggle physical perfection and society.
He does. He was also already involved with a woman named Cecilia at the time, who is noted as being very pretty and entirely suited to a man of his social standing.
So we have this massive, almost cruel chasm. On one side, Merup, the tragic, deformed product of centuries of magical inbreeding. And on the other side, Tom Riddle Sr., the apex of Muggle vitality. And this is where the collision...
The disastrous collision.
Yeah. Merup, who is completely desperate, isolated, and just totally infatuated, uses a love potion on Tom Sr.
Which is an act of profound, invasive darkness.
It really is. I mean, we laugh about love potions sometimes in pop culture, but...
Oh, but it's horrific. A love potion essentially overrides a person's free will. It forces a false manic infatuation. It's a literal chemical dependency masquerading as romantic love.
I honestly see it as a form of magical identity theft.
Ooh, magical identity theft. I like that.
Because she hijacked his agency, she took over his entire neurochemistry to create a life for herself. She maintained this chemical hostage situation long enough to not only marry him, but to conceive a child.
The implications of that are terrifying.
The biological implications of a child conceived under a state of total chemical coercion are chilling. It's almost as if the very foundation of Tom Riddle Jr.'s existence is built on a complete absence of genuine human connection.
That is a critical psychological baseline for him. It's a theft of autonomy. And, the tragedy just compounds because eventually Meroe stopped administering the potion.
Why do you think she did that?
Well, the historical implication is that she became pregnant and hoped the child would be enough to make him stay. Or perhaps she foolishly believed he might have genuinely fallen in love with her during his magically induced stupor.
But the reality is brutal. The moment that potion metabolizes out of it, the moment that chemical fog lifts and his own mind turns psychological whiplash must aggravate.
Unbearable. He immediately abandoned.
Just runs. He runs right back to his wealthy life right before she goes in.
Leaving Meroe completely destitute, heartbroken, and basically stripped of her magical will to live. She wanders into London and ends up at a Muggle orphanage.
And here is where the biological lottery happens. Merope gives birth at the orphanage, and she dies almost immediately after. But her final, desperate words to Mrs. Cole, the matron of the orphanage, are a plea for aesthetic.
Yeah, a plea for his looks.
She literally says, I hope he looks like his papa.
And against all biological odds, considering the centuries of severe compounding genetic damage on the Gaunt side, Merope actually gets her dying wish. The records are explicit here. Tom Riddle Jr. wins the genetic lottery.
Big time. There is absolutely zero trace of the Gaunt family phenotype in his face. No heavy jaw, no dull hair, no wandering eyes. He is described as a miniature of his handsome father.
He is tall, he is pale, and he has this striking dark hair.
He inherited none of the physical degradation of his mother's family, but crucially, he inherited all of their dark, potent, magical abilities.
And that's the lethal combination. But, he didn't just passively inherit those looks. What is truly terrifying is how quickly and consciously he realized the power of his own physical form.
He weaponized.
He did. Tom Jr. didn't just exist as a good-looking child. As he grows up and eventually goes to Hogwarts, he actively weaponizes his appearance.
Let's dig into that weaponization, because being handsome is one thing, but using it as a tactical advantage in a school full of magical prodigies requires a deeply sociopathic understanding of human nature.
Absolutely. He combined physical perfection with acute psychological manipulation. He understood that human beings, even magical ones, are biologically wired to trust symmetry and beauty. We have an implicit bias towards it.
The halo effect.
Exactly, the halo effect. He played a very specific role to absolute perfection. He ensured that to the faculty and his peers, he appeared as the poor, brilliant, tragic, parentless, but incredibly brave and noble boy.
He was the ultimate golden boy. He became a model student, a school prefect. Everyone loved him.
Everyone except Dumbledore.
Right. Always except Dumbledore.
Yeah. Dumbledore saw the predatory nature beneath the charm from their very first meeting in the orphanage. Back when Tom didn't yet know he needed to hide his cruelty, Dumbledore saw the boy who liked to hurt other children and hang their pets. But for everyone else in the magical world, the mask was entirely flawless.
If you look at how Harry describes him when viewing the Slughorn memory, and this is a crucial detail, Harry notes the exact mechanics of Riddle's charm.
It's so calculated.
It is. Harry observes the interaction and specifically notes the hesitancy, the casual tone, the careful flattery, none of it overdone. It's that restraint that makes him so incredibly...
He was a master calibrator of human emotion.
Yes. He knew exactly how much humility to project to make his brilliance seem natural and, non-threatening to the teachers.
And his peers were completely enthralled by it. When Riddle smiled, the other boys in his inner circle, the proto-Death Eaters, literally laughed and cast him admiring looks.
They worshipped him.
They really did. He held court purely through charisma and physical presence. Harry even notes that among that dark group of boys, Voldemort possessed the most handsome face, and he looked the most relaxed.
He was the undisputed alpha, but not through brute force, right? Through aesthetic and psychological dominance.
And he didn't just use this on the living either. He manipulated the dead with it, too.
Oh, the great.
He managed to charm Helena Ravenclaw, the Grey Lady Goat, into revealing a secret she had kept violently hid for nearly 1,000 years, the location of her mother's diadem.
Harry specifically mutters during that realization he could be charming when he wanted.
Which loops perfectly back to your concept of magical identity theft from earlier.
Oh, worried.
Marape lacked the physical beauty to attract Riddle Sr., so she had to brew a literal chemical potion to force a man to love her. Tom Riddle Jr. essentially inherited that exact same manipulative parasitic trait.
But he didn't need a cauldron.
Exactly. His face was the trap. He traded a liquid potion for the psychological potion of extreme weaponized charisma.
That is so dark. So we have this apex predator operating under the guise of the perfect, exceptionally handsome student. He graduates from Hogwarts. He is widely considered the most brilliant student to ever walk the halls.
A prodigy.
Everyone expects him to fast track right into the Ministry of Magic. He could have been Minister for Magic within a decade. And what does he do? He goes into...
Yes, the future Dark Lord, the most powerful tyrannical force in modern wizarding history, begins his postgraduate career as a shop assistant at Borgin and Burton Nocturne.
I have to admit, when you look at it purely chronologically, it seems absurd.
It really does.
Why would someone so boundlessly talented, so relentlessly ambitious, settle for moving cursed necklaces and dusty artifacts in a dimly lit shop?
It seems totally jarring on the surface, but if we analyze his ultimate secret goal, which is immortality, through the creation of Horcruxes, Borgin, and Berg, wasn't a retail job. It was a strategic deployment.
It was a hunting ground.
Exactly. Borgin and Berg's was the absolute epicenter of dark magical artifacts in Britain. But more importantly than that, it was the one place where he could naturally network with the old, wealthy, pureblood family.
The ones hoarding all the good stuff.
Right. The families who hoarded the ancient historical treasures he desperately wanted to use as vessels for his soul. He needed access to the private vaults of the elite. And being the charming, knowledgeable antiquities buyer gave him the keys to those homes.
And during this retail era, the historical records show that his looks actually hit their absolute peak.
He grew into his features.
He did. He grew his hair a little longer than that neat cut he had. His cheeks became somewhat hollowed out, giving him this sharp, patrician, almost aristocratic appearance. Suited him perfectly. He looked more handsome, more refined than ever before.
And he deployed that peak handsomeness with lethal precision when he met Hepzibah Smith.
Oh, Hepzibah.
Yeah. She was an incredibly wealthy, elderly witch. She's described rather uncharitably in the texts as ugly and fat, and she lived surrounded by priceless art. Crucially, she possessed both a cup that belonged to Helga Hufflepuff and a locket that belonged to Salazar Slytherin.
The ultimate prize, the Founder's Relics. And how does the brilliant, ruthless Tom Riddle get access to priceless artifacts?
He brings her flowers.
He brings her flowers. He leans down and kisses her hand. He plays the devoted, charming, attentive young man who is just completely enamored with her company and her stories.
He is fully leaning into the physical contrast there. He knows exactly the intoxicating effect his hollow-cheeked, long-haired aristocratic beauty has on this lonely, vain woman. He is playing her like a finely tuned instrument.
But there is an incredible, heavy, dark irony pulsing beneath this interaction.
What do you mean?
Well, he is using his father's handsome, muggle-inherited face to charm this elitist pureblood. And he is doing this knowing full well that he has already traveled to Little Hangleton and murdered his father and his Muggle grandparents.
Oh, that is a critical psychological and biological. You're right. The physical mask is absolutely perfect. It is operating at peak efficiency. But the soul underneath that mask has already begun to decay.
It's rotting.
He has already committed the ultimate taboo. He has already created at least one Horcrux, by this point the diary, using the murder of Moaning Myrtle. And the murder of his father likely facilitated the creation of the Gaunt Ring Horcrux.
And the strain of that soul-splitting is finally starting to show. The mask's beginning to crack under the pressure of the dark magic.
The very first signs of it.
Yeah. During that meeting with Hepzibah, she shows him the Hufflepuff cup and the Slytherin lock, and the historical memory gives us the exact moment the biological facade slipped. Harry, watching the memory, notes it clearly. When Riddle's greed surfaces, his normally dark brown eyes flash scarlet.
A red gleam in his dark eyes. Yeah, the text says Voldemort's eyes had flashed scarlet. I really want to pause on the biological mechanics of that for a moment.
Please do.
because the human eye cannot flash scarlet naturally. This isn't a trick of the light in a dimly lit room. This is the first physical manifestation of the dark magic actively altering his biology.
The soul bleeding through.
Exactly. The fractured soul is pushing against the confines of the human vessel. You could liken it to a form of magical radiation. The energy of a mutilated soul is so toxic that in moments of high emotional volatility, like extreme greed or malice, it literally bleeds into the physical tissue, actively altering the pigmentation of his irises.
It's like the hardware is starting to overheat because the software is totally corrupt.
That's a great analogy.
Shortly after that meeting, he murders Hepzibah Smith. He cleverly frames her aging house self, Cokie, for the crime. Then he steals the cup and the locket. Vanish. He resigns his post at Borgin and Burke, and the handsome, charming Tom Riddle completely drops off the map for 10 long.
And this 10-year disappearance is the absolute fulcrum of our entire biological study today. This is the era where he pushes the boundaries of dark magic further than anyone in recorded wizarding history.
He goes completely off the grid.
He travels deeply into the dark arts, undergoes terrible magical transformations, and when he finally emerges, he is forever changed.
Let's call this the era of the greatest misconception, because when he finally returns to Britain from this decade in the shadows, he is entirely unrecognizable. The mask hasn't just dropped, the mask has melted.
It's gone.
We need to paint a very clear picture of what he looks like when he returns to Hogwarts to ask Dumbledore for the defense against the dark arts job.
The visual evidence here is vital. When he enters Dumbledore's office, Harry, who is viewing the memory in the pensive, actually lets out a stifled gasp. He's no longer handsome Tom Riddle. Not even close. The text describes his features as looking as though they had been burned and blurred. His skin is waxy and oddly distorted. The whites of his eyes now have a permanently bloody look. He's wearing a long black cloak, and his face is as pale as the snow glistening on his shoulders.
Burned and blurred, waxy, bloody eyes. It is an incredibly visceral description. It doesn't sound like he was hit with a curse or burned in a fire. It sounds like his body is fundamentally failing to hold a human shape.
It is failing.
And this is where we have to do the Horcrux math to understand the why behind this terrifying physical deterioration.
Right. To understand the physical toll, we have to look at the spiritual mathematics. In wizarding history, creating a single Horcrux is considered an act of unspeakable evil that fundamentally damages the creator.
Just one is enough to ruin you.
Exactly. The act of murder tears the soul, and the dark spell required to encase that torn fragment into an object permanently mutilates the wizard's spiritual integrity. Before Voldemort, nobody had ever dared to make more than one. The sheer instability of it was unthinkable.
But during this 10-year period, Voldemort didn't just make one, he made 5.
5.
He had the diary, the gaunt ring, the Slytherin locket, the Hufflepuff cup, and he retrieved and used the Ravenclaw die.
Which means he has intentionally fractured his soul into 6 pieces at this. 5 pieces are hidden in an external object, and the remaining central piece resides in his physical body.
So his original body is currently operating on exactly 1/6 of his original soul.
Right. Let's apply a biological metaphor to this to really grasp it. Think of the soul as the master DNA blueprint that tells the physical body how to render itself.
Okay, the architectural scaffolding of human identity.
Yeah. When you delete roughly 83% of that blueprint, the biological vessel simply isn't designed to withstand that kind of deficit. The body relies on the wholeness of the soul to maintain its integrity, its basic humanity. By running on a fraction of a soul, he has basically triggered a kind of spiritual autoimmune disease.
Oh, wow. That makes so much sense. The burned and blurred look isn't a disguise he put on. It's the physical body failing to hold the sharp, defined Tom Riddle because there isn't enough human soul left to define the template.
Exactly.
The body is blurring because the underlying code is corrupt.
It's literally stripping away his human features, smoothing them out, rendering him less and less human with every single fracture. It's a literal loss of definition.
And it wasn't just his appearance either. The historical accounts note his voice changed too. He lost that smooth, perfectly calibrated, charming voice that he used on Slughorn and Hepzibah Smith. It became much higher pitched, colder, more serpentine.
The physical vocal cords were literally warping under the strain of the dark magic.
Now, I want to dramatically halt the narrative right here. Stop everything.
Okay, stopping.
Because this specific moment, this post-10-year disappearance version of Voldemort sitting in Dumbledore's office, is where the biggest pop culture myth comes into play. The text says, during this meeting with Dumbledore, that his eyes flash red and his slit-like nostrils flare.
And that phrase right there, slit-like nostrils, is the trap that catches almost everyone.
Exactly. This is absolutely crucial for you listening. At this point in the timeline, despite the burned, blurred, waxy features and the slit-like nostrils, he still has a normal nose.
Yes. The historical record is very careful here. Having slit-like nostrils does not equal being noseless.
Thank you.
He is still inhabiting his original, albeit heavily mutated, physical body. He hasn't lost an appendage. The nostril openings have narrowed and closed somewhat because the surrounding tissue of his face has become, as we noted, distorted and waxy. The skin is pulling.
One of our sources gave a really striking real-world analogy to help visualize this. It compares this specific stage of Voldemort's nose to Michael Jackson's nose later in his life.
It's an apt, albeit tragic, comparison for visualization. Structurally altered, pinched, surgically, or in Voldemort's case, magically narrowed, but structurally still very much a human nose attached to the center of the human face. It is not flattened into a snake's snout yet.
It's basically structural collapse. The scaffolding is giving way, pinching the nostrils, but the nose itself is there. So this half-rendered, waxy, blurred version of Voldemort is the one that builds the Death Eater army, launches the first Wizarding War, and eventually goes to Godric's Hollow to kill a baby named Harry Potter.
Which brings us to the first monumental downfall, and the total, absolute destruction of that original, heavily compromised biological vessel.
Right. He goes to the Potter house. He tries to kill Harry. Lily Potter's sacrifice, casting an ancient blood magic protection son. Voldemort, who operates entirely on power and completely fails to understand the mechanics of love or sacrifice, casts the killing curse at Harry.
And it backfired.
The curse hits Lily's protection, rebounds with catastrophic force, and strikes.
And the result is biological annihilation.
Total annihilation.
The explosion completely incinerates his body. The house is blown apart, and there is no trace of Voldemort's physical form left whatsoever. It is completely vaporized.
The mutated original body of Tom Riddle is just gone. Duh. Which forces us into the darkest, most abstract phase of our time. We have to examine what happens to a severely fractured 1/6 of a human soul when it is suddenly stripped of any physical anchor at all. We enter the era.
This is an unimaginably terrifying state of existence. Voldemort himself later describes this form to his Death Eaters as pure spirit and mere shadow and vapor.
It sounds awful.
He says he was powerless, weaker than the weakest creature alive, with absolutely no means to help himself. No wand, no physical substance.
He says his only memory of this time is forcing himself, sleeplessly, endlessly, second by second, just to exist. Just holding on to the agonizing edge of consciousness without a physical brain to process.
Because it is entirely unnatural. A soul is meant to cross over when the body dies. The universe, or the magical physics of death, is trying to pull him onward.
To whatever comes next.
Right. But his Horcruxes acted as anchors, dragging that central soul fragment back to the physical plane, but without providing a vessel for it to inhabit. He is trapped in a sensory void, perpetual state of drowning.
So to escape that void, to feel anything at all, he has to find vessels. For over a decade, hiding deep in the forests of Albania, this shadow and vapor survives by possessing animals, primarily snakes and rats.
But here we run into a severe biological incompatibility.
Okay, break that down.
Well, a rat's biology, a snake's nervous system, it is simply not designed to house a human soul. And it is certainly not designed to house a dark, fractured, incredibly potent piece of a dark wizard's soul. His dark presence acts like a corrosive acid within their tiny bodies.
It's a metabolic overload.
Exactly. It severely shortens their lifespan. None of the animals last long before the biological strain literally burns them out from the inside, killing them and forcing him to flee into yet another creature just to survive.
He is a spiritual parasite burning through disposable biological batteries.
Precisely. He is caught in this miserable cycle of possessing, burning out, and discarding for his vermin, until finally a human battery wanders into his forest, Quirinus Quirrell.
Now, we really need to clarify the timeline here because, once again, the cinematic adaptations completely confused the lore for the sake of visuals.
They sped it up.
They really did. In the first film, when Harry meets Quirrell in the leaky cauldron before the school year even starts, Quirrell is already wearing the purple. The movie heavily implies Voldemort is already stuck to the back of his head.
But according to the strict historical text, that is incorrect. Quirrell did encounter Voldemort in the Albanian forest, and Quirrell was bent to Voldemort's will. Quirrell did bring him back to London, likely by Voldemort possessing a small animal that Quirrell carried in his luggage.
But not his body yet.
Right. Voldemort did not physically possess Quirrell's human body yet.
He was biding his time. He was an observer. It wasn't until Quirrell failed his very first mission, failing to rob the Sorcerer's Stone from Gringotts Vault 713 because Hagrid got there first, that Voldemort decided this man was far too incompetent to be left unsupervised.
He needed to take the wheel.
That is when he makes the move to physically merge with Quirrell.
And this leads to a truly fascinating piece of magical theory presented by researchers in our sources. By actively possessing Quirrell's body, sharing his biological space, and morphing a face onto the back of his head, Voldemort essentially turned Quirrell into a temporary Horcrux.
I want to debate this temporary Horcrux theory with you, because if we accept it, the implications are staggering. If possessing Quirrell turned a living human into a temporary Horcrux, does that mean every single rat, every single snake he possessed in those Albanian forests over those 12 years, were they all technically temporary Horcruxes too?
I have to push back on the terminology there. It's a compelling thought, but we have to distinguish between a Horcrux and parasitic possession.
Okay, what's the difference?
A true Horcrux requires a highly specific, deeply complex, dark magical ritual to permanently encase a severed soul fragment into a vessel. It is meant to be permanent and protective. What he was doing to the rats and to Quirrell was purely parasitic survival.
Okay, so it's less like a Horcrux and more like a demonic possession?
Exactly. The rat or Quirrell isn't a magical container. They are a consumed fuel source. A Horcrux preserves the soul. Voldemort's possession destroys the host. However, the physical toll on a human host found. Even a human body, robust as it is compared to a rat, begins to break down when hosting an external, dark soul frag. Voldemort's parasitic presence severely weakens Quirrell's biology,
which forces them to resort to desperate, horrific measures just to keep the host body from shutting down before the They have to hunt down unicorns in the Forbidden Forest and drink their
slaying a pure, defenseless creature to drink its blood. We learn from the Centaur Ferenz that doing this keeps you alive, even if you are an inch from death, but at a terrible price. From the moment the blood touches your lips, you live a cursed half-life.
Let's analyze the biology of that. What does a cursed half-life actually mean? I imagine it's a state where your body is technically functioning, heart beating, lungs breathing, but your soul is fundamentally unable to experience joy. But here's the terrifying logic. He completely does not care.
He doesn't care at all. The curse of a half-life doesn't frighten him because he already possesses real Horcrux. His ultimate immortality is secured elsewhere.
Right, the cup, the locket.
Exactly. And as for Quirrell, living a cursed life, Quirrell's just a disposable battery. If Quirrell's soul is cursed to eternal torment, it's entirely irrelevant to Voldemort.
He is literally just trying to keep the biological vehicle running long enough to get his hands on the Sorcerer's Stone, brew the elixir of life, and build a real body for himself. But the plan catastrophically fails.
Falls apart completely.
Harry confronts Quirrell, and because of Lily's sacrificial protection still burning inside Harry's skin, Harry's physical touch acts like acid. Quirrell's body blisters, burns, and breaks apart.
And Voldemort instantly abandons the host as it dies, fleeing once again as mere shadow and vapor, screaming as he is violently ripped back out into the void, back to the forest, back to possessing rats.
He spends another 2 grueling years like this, hitting his absolute lowest point. He later admits he feared he would never regain his power, that he'd have been entirely abandoned by his followers.
He thought it was over.
It seemed he would be a force phantom forever, until Peter Pettigrew, Wormtail, fakes his own death, escapes Britain, and manages to track his Dark Master down in Albania.
Which forces Voldemort into the next terrifying stage of our biological timeline. He cannot execute a complex resurrection plan as a shadow hiding in a rat. He needs to transition from a helpless parasite to a physical being capable of holding a wand. He needs a biological bridge.
Right, because he refuses to just possess Wormtail. He learned his lesson with Quirrell about the extreme fragility of human hosts. Plus, Wormtail is supposed to be a dead...
It's terrible cover.
Exactly. If a dead man who looks like Peter Pettigrew is suddenly walking around Britain acting strange, the Ministry would be on him instantly. He needs his own body, even a temporary one.
So, relying on his sheer, unadulterated magical genius, Voldemort invents a dark spell, a highly complex potion to create an incubation body, a rudimentary form to house his spirit until the true resurrection can be performed.
And the ingredients for this incubation potion are incredibly specific and absolutely crucial for understanding the final aesthetic outcome. He uses unicorn blood again, exploiting extreme purity for mere survival, and he combines it with the venom of his newly acquired giant snake, Nagini.
The alchemy of that is sick, combining the ultimate symbol of magical purity with the lethal venom of a cursed beast. And the biological result of this potion is one of the most grotesque visual descriptions in the entire historical record.
Listen to this description and really... The text describes this rudimentary body as having the shape of a crouched child. But it says Harry, upon seeing it, thought he had never seen anything less like a child. It was completely hairless, it was scaly looking, the skin was a dark, raw, reddish black, its arms and legs were thin and feeble, and its face was flat and snake-like with gleaming red eyes. Harry describes it as ugly, slimy, blind, but 100 times worse.
It is the absolute antithesis of the handsome, statuesque Tom Riddle we started with. It is a corrupted, venom-fueled homunculus.
I look at this rudimentary body like a grotesque magical chrysalis. It's not a real, fully functioning body. It's a hacked-together biological operator. It's just barely strong enough to run the basics off. He can be carried, he can hold a wand, he can speak, and he can cast a curse.
And he does cast curse. Even in this pathetic, scaly fetal form, he retains his lethal magical capability. He uses this tiny, horrific body to murder Bertha Jorkin, extracting the vital information he needs about the Triwizard Tournament, and he uses it to murder the Muggle caretaker, Frank Bright. The magical genius remains entirely intact, even when the vessel is monstrous.
But the chrysalis is just a stepping stone. The incubation period is over. The goal is the graveyard in Little Hangleton. The goal is the true final body. And this brings us to the absolute crescendo of this entire deep dive. This is the moment we finally definitively explain the iconic monster face.
The graveyard resurrection scene, the brewing of the ancient regeneration potion.
To build a permanent body from scratch, the potion requires 3 deeply symbolic, very dark ingredients. First, bone the father, unknowingly given. Wormtail takes a bone from Tom Riddle Sr.'s grave, Strapture.
Right, the founder.
Second, flesh of the servant, willingly given. Wormtail cuts off his own hand with a silver dagger, binder. And third, blood of the enemy, forcibly taken. Life force.
And Voldemort arrogantly demands it be Harry Potter's blood. We will get to the catastrophic biological consequences of that decision in just a moment. But first, let's look at the physical result of the potion.
The cauldron boils with these raw ingredients. The raw, scaly, rudimentary child body is dropped inside. The ingredients synthesize. The cauldron melts away, and Lord Voldemort rises again into his final adult form.
He's back.
He emerges tall, skeletally thin, with skin whiter than a skull. He has wide, livid scarlet eyes. And now, for the very first time in his entire life, he has a flat, snake-like nose with slits for nostrils.
Now, not 10 years ago during his disappearance. Not when he killed Harry's parents. Now, in the grave.
This is the massive misconception we promised to debunk. We need to explicitly connect these dots for you. The source text definitively states that his pre-death features the waxy, blurred, pinched nostril features he had when he attacked Godric's Hollow were not snake. The text literally says, when Harry is viewing the memory of the Voldemort who asked for a job, his features were not those Harry had seen emerge from the Great Stone Cauldron. They were not a snake.
The timeline is completely undeniable if you read the text close. The serpentine features are a brand new addition to his adult morphology.
So I have to ask you the multi-million-dollar lore question. My mind is kind of blown making this connection because it changes everything I thought I knew about him.
Go for it.
Are you telling me that his iconic, terrifying, snake-like look isn't actually some poetic reflection of Slytherin soul? Is it essentially just a magical allergic reaction to the ingredients of his own resurrection?
That is exactly what the biological evidence points. Think about the physical components of that ritual. The rudimentary body that was dropped into that cauldron to serve as the base template for the adult form was heavily composed snake venom, specifically Nagini's venom.
Wait. So when the regeneration person rebuilt his adult form, synthesizing the bone, flesh, and blood around that rudimentary template, it literally scaled up the reptilian DNA it had been gestating.
Exactly.
The snake nose is a direct, unavoidable physical byproduct of using snake venom to survive his spirit phase.
Precisely. It's a biological compromise born of desperation. He didn't choose to look like a snake to be theatrical or to honor Salazar Slytherin. He looks like a snake because he had to rely on a snake's bodily fluids to survive long enough to build a body. It's a permanent physical scar of his own extreme weakness.
Which makes the movie adaptations, specifically those flashbacks in the Deathly Hallows films, so incredibly frustrating. They show him walking into the Potter's house in 1981 with the full snake face, no nose, flat slit. And if you go ask an AI right now, when did Voldemort lose his nose, it will scrape those movie descriptions and tell you he lost it from splitting his soul too many times before.
It's a prime example of visual shorthand totally overriding textual logic. The filmmakers understandably wanted him to look instantly recognizable as the monster in every scene, so they ignored the biological timeline. But by doing so, they erased the fascinating, pathetic reality of why he looks like that. They turned a desperate, grotesque, magical compromise into a cool, stylistic choice.
It's wild how widely accepted that cinematic mistake. It robs the story of its biological consequence. But okay, so now he has this final, durable, venom-infused, snake-nosed body, and it serves him well. It is incredibly powerful. It withstands a brutal, earth-shattering duel with Dumbledore in the Ministry Age. It allows him to successfully take over the wizard, but it contains a fatal, microscopic biological flaw.
A massive flaw.
A flaw born entirely from his own theatrical arrogance.
The blood mistake.
During the graveyard resurrection, Voldemort could have used the blood of any enemy. He had thousands of people who hated him. He could have used a captured Auror, but he insisted on using Harry's. He wanted to overcome Lily's ancient protection. He wanted to be able to physically touch Harry without his skin blistering and burning like Quirrell's did.
And he achieved that short-term goal. He could touch Harry. He proved it right there in the graveyard by pressing his finger to Harry's scar. But Dumbledore understood the long-term biological consequence of what Voldemort had just done to his own vascular.
The source material notes a tiny, brilliant... When Harry escapes the graveyard and tells Dumbledore that Voldemort used his blood in the... Harry sees a gleam of something like triumph in Dumbledore's eye. Why on earth would Dumbledore feel triumph? The darkest wizard just made himself immune to Harry's ultimate...
Because Dumbledore understood the deep, esoteric magic of blood and sacrifice better than anyone. Lily's sacrificial enchantment, the magic that deflected the killing curse, lived inside Harry's blood. By forcibly taking Harry's blood and weaving it into the creation of his own newly constructed body, Voldemort essentially downloaded that protective enchantment into his own veins.
He tethered Harry to life. Dumbledore explains it perfectly. Says, his body keeps her sacrifice alive, and while that enchantment survives...
I wouldn't call it a Trojan horse, as some might, because a Trojan horse implies an attack from the inside out. This was a biological tether and anger. Voldemort essentially tied himself to his sinking ship. He unknowingly turned his own physical body into an external life support system for Harry.
It is the ultimate irony. Voldemort spent his entire life, his entire magical career, trying to purge every ounce of muggle weakness and human frailty. He wanted to be an untouchable, immortal, dark god. But his desperate grasp and vulnerability created exact mechanism,
which plays out spectacularly in the Forbidden Forest during the final phase of the Battle of Hogwarts. Voldemort hits an unarmed, defenseless Harry with the killing curse, but Harry doesn't die.
Because the tether, the blood in Voldemort's veins, says Harry must live. Voldemort physically cannot kill the person whose life his own body is mad.
Instead, the killing curse only successfully targets and destroys the piece of Voldemort's fractured soul that had been accidentally attached to Harry's, and the source gives us a brilliant, terrifying, full-circle vision for this destroyed soul fragment.
Yes, when Harry's knocked out by the curse and enters the limbo state at King's Cross Station, he sees what that destroyed soul fragment acts.
It looks exactly like the rudimentary child body from the grave.
It's described as a small, naked child, curled on the ground under a bed, skin raw, flayed, small, fragile. It is shuddering, gasping for breath. That tiny, pathetic, agonizing thing is what a fraction of Voldemort's soul actually looks like without a vessel to hide. It's what he really is underneath all the dark magic. Terrifying.
It is the stark, undeniable visual proof of the anatomical and spiritual devastation he inflicted upon himself over decades. He took a whole, potentially beautiful, immortal soul and reduced it to a flayed, helpless creature crying.
And this leads us to the final confront, the last duel in the Great Hall. Harry returns from the forest, he fights back, and we witness the final spectacular failure of all the biological and magical Voldemort tried desperately.
Voldemort is wielding the Elder Wand, the most powerful wand in existence, but Harry is the true master of the Elder Wand through a complex chain of disarmament. And in wizarding duel mechanics, a wand will absolutely not strike down its true master.
So Voldemort casts the killing curse one last time. The wand refuses to comply with the order to kill its master. The curse rebounds off Harry's spell and strikes.
And this is where we have to address the final and perhaps most egregious cinematic alteration of the entire saga.
The intensely anticlimactic end.
Exactly. Contrast the movie's highly dramatic, slow-motion disintegration, where Voldemort shatters into flakes of ash and floats away on the wind like some divine, mythical force returning to the cosmos, with the stark, brutal, grounded reality of the source text.
In the book, he doesn't dissolve. There is no magical ash. The text says he simply falls over backward. He hits the floor with a mundane, heavy thud. Tom Riddle is dead. It's a normal, dead-constructed body. The ultimate mundane find.
That mundane thud is thematically vital to the entire story. He spent his entire life terrified of ordinary human death, doing horrific things to transcend it. But in the end, despite the Horcruxes, despite the snake venom potion, despite the pure blood mania, despite the dark magic, his biological machine simply stops work. It falls over, subject to gravity, just like any muggle.
His corpse isn't even treated with reverence or awe by the survivors. The aftermath entirely unceremonious. The text notes his body is moved away from the others, placed in a separate, and likely just burned or dumped in an unmarked. He is discarded, and his soul, fractured and mutilated beyond repair, is trapped forever. Pathetic, flayed child bow, unable to move.
He achieved the exact opposite of his. He sought aesthetic perfection, pure blood dominance, and absolute immortality. And he ended up a grotesque, discarded corpse housing a permanently tortured spirit. Oh.
It is an incredible, tragic biological journey. From the handsome, effortlessly charming Tom Riddle, who could win over anyone with a smile and a hollow, to the snake venom self-sabotaging final form that couldn't even cast a spell without it bouncing back.
It perfectly illustrates the central thesis of our discussion. The physical cost of chasing immortality through dark, unnatural means is total biological degradation. The magic consumed the vessel.
Which brings us all the way back to the provocative thought that sparked higher deep dive. That first source we we read, the fan questioning the aesthetic redemption of Voldemort's soul. I want you, the listener, to mull this over because it is a fantastic philosophical.
The question was, if Voldemort's soul pieces were to somehow return to his original body, if he had felt true remorse, the lore says is the only way to heal a fractured soul, would he regain his original beauty or remain a serpent?
It's a profound thought experiment to leave you with. Is physical beauty in this wizarding world inextricably tied to the wholeness of the soul? If he magically glued all those soul fragments back together through the agony of remorse, would the biological hardware reboot? Would the burned, blurred, waxy features sharpen back into the handsome face of Tom Riddle Sr.?
The text mentions that feeling remorse to heal a soul is a pain so severe it can destroy you. If he survived that pain, would the physical damage revert? Or was the damage done by the dark magic, the sheer volume of murders, and specifically the integration of the snake venom during his resurrection, simply too deep? Was it a point of no return for his biological blueprint?
I tend to think the venom rewrote the physical code permanently. The snake face wasn't just a reflection of his soul. As we've established, it was the literal physical ingredient revival. Even if his soul became whole, his body was built out of snake venom and graveyard. He built his own monstrous cage, and I don't think remorse cures.
But it forces us to question everything we assume about the connection between physical appearance and spiritual integrity in magical lore. If the soul dictates the form, perhaps a healed soul would shed the scale. It is an endlessly fascinating debate.
It absolutely is. And that is why we do these deep dives, to look past the surface, to look past the movies and find the real mechanisms at play. Thank you so much for joining us today and for letting us unpack this incredible timeline. Keep questioning the lore you think you know, keep challenging the visual shorthand, and remember the real answers are usually hidden right there in the text, waiting for a closer look.